Good morning, everybody. Just like to convene our Majority Leaders Roundtable on affordable housing for Monday, October 27, 2025. Hard to believe the end of the month is almost here. Um, I am Senator Bob Duff, representing Norwalk and Darien. My co-chair will be with us shortly, I think online. Um, and so I think we would just like to get right to it. I know we have Emmeline Harrigan, the planning director from the town of Fairfield. And then Jonathan Reiner, if I hope I said that correctly, Director of Planning and Development Services for the town of Groton. Do you want to go together or do you want to go separately? However, come on up then. Yep. So just separate is fine. Yep. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Please raise your right hand. No, I'm kidding. Wrong committee. Wrong committee. Yeah. Thank you. Welcome. We really appreciate your being here today. Look forward to your presentation and any questions afterwards.
The button. Thank you so much. My name is Emmeline Harrigan. I'm the planning director for the town of Fairfield. I also serve as the president of the Connecticut chapter of the American Planning Association. I do want to point out that we have our past president, Rebecca Auger, who's here, as well as our president-elect, John Reiner, who will do the presentation after me. So CCAPA is well represented today. So for Fairfield, we have had an extraordinary experience with 830Gs in particular as of late. Just to give you an overview as to Fairfield, we have a population of 62,000. We are, of course, at the eastern edge of Fairfield County. Let's see. Can you go to the next slide, please? Okay. And our key employers include Bigelow Tea. We also are proud to have two universities within town, Sacred Heart University and Fairfield University, both of which have undergone significant transformation in the last 10 years and really have increased their enrollment dramatically. They're two of our major employers. And of course, we have a very competitive and desirable school district. With about 9,100 students within the district right now, which is a little below our highest enrollment that was just over 10,000 about 5 years ago. So we're, like the rest of the state, we're in a little bit of a decline in terms of our student enrollment. We are also proximate to the Merritt Parkway, I-95, Route 1, and we benefit from 3 Metro North train stations within our jurisdiction: Southport, downtown, and our newest station, which was opened in 2011, Fairfield Black Rock. Next slide, please. We do have pretty high income within Fairfield. 63.8% of households have income greater than $100,000. We know that that does not represent even all of Fairfield County or certainly the state of Connecticut, that we are an affluent community, which means that we've had a lot of changeover, I would say, in terms of income, in particular as housing stock has been redeveloped. 82.9% of our housing stock is owner occupied, with 17.1 renter households. And just to give you an idea as to how that skews more single-family home ownership, Fairfield County plus Connecticut, the overall percentage is about 66.5%. A quick snapshot for Fairfield's households: 21% of Fairfield households are single-person households, and within those single-person households, 61% of these are single women living alone. 63% of them are 65 years in age and older. 53% of single-person households are also elderly people living alone, and 63% of those elderly households make less than 80% of our area median income for Fairfield, with those folks paying more than 30% of their income towards housing costs. So even though we are an affluent community, we do have folks who are dealing with housing affordability and housing instability issues. 52% of extremely low-income households with severe cost burdens in Fairfield are elderly households. So we have really, through the work of two local groups, Fairfield Housing Advocates or Fairfield Senior Advocates, and also our Affordable Housing Committee, we've really been trying to deal with what that means for our senior residents in need. We also, next slide, please. We also have a mix match supply relative to our need. 78% of the units in Fairfield are 3+ bedrooms, while 55% of our households are 1 to 2-person households. So we have housing stock that is much larger than what the average household needs. So we really need to kind of work on constructing new units that meet that need in our community. Next slide, please. We've seen significant construction and growth. So between 2003 and 2013, 81% of what was built in Fairfield, based on the permits that we issued, was detached single-family housing stock. That has flipped. 52% of the permits that we issue between 2014 and last year, 2024, 52% of that is 5+ units in terms of what's being built today, with detached single family going down to 38%. So it's really been a change in terms of what we've seen. And if you go to the next slide, you can see this in terms of the distribution of housing production. Really, we had one blip in 2004 where we had some multifamily that was built. But since 2013, you can really see the purple is the multifamily that we've had constructed within Fairfield, and just how much of a share that has been within the construction permits that have been issued within Fairfield. Next slide, please. So for us, our median home value has risen significantly since February 2017, and I need to thank the Center for Housing Opportunity for this graphic. Our median home value was $572,499, and as of February 2025, that's now $865,670. So as you can imagine, what that also does within the community is it also pulls our property values based on our tax assessment up significantly as well, which means that, folks who didn't expect that they bought 25 years ago $1 million house now have $1 million house that they're paying taxes on. So it really has affected our community quite deeply. The AMI for one person in Fairfield is $104,230. 4-person household is $148,900. So what we know from recent United Way ALICE surveys is 24% of working families in Fairfield struggle to afford the basic cost of living. I also want to point out, I think I've shared this with some folks, that I have a recent UConn graduate who is very excited to actually get his first new grown-up job. And he'll get mad at me, but he makes $23 an hour, his first grown-up job, right? The hourly wage in Fairfield, and I think, while the community that I live in is probably a little bit less, but the hourly wage needed to afford a 2-bedroom apartment in Fairfield approaches $38 an hour. So that's not a lot of young people who can afford that without having to double, triple up, quadruple up within an apartment, just because the cost is so high. So let's talk about 830Gs in Fairfield. If we go to the next slide, please. So set-aside developments in Fairfield since 2008, which is when we first started seeing 830G applications, we've had 38 applications within the town of Fairfield. These have proposed over 2,000 units within our community. 900 of those were approved. So far, only 342 of those have been constructed. So even though these go through the process, we don't see a lot of them come to full fruition. Some of them, yes, but certainly not all of them. But given the development that we have seen, We have been fortunate enough through the existing deed restricted units and government assisted units that we have, as well as that new construction spike that you saw on the previous slide, to be able to qualify for a moratorium. And we qualified for a moratorium at the end of this past March. What happened in the meantime is there was a race by developers to beat the moratorium clock. So we had 12 applications for 830G submitted from the end of October through March before our moratorium took effect. This represented about 2,000 units in Fairfield. 603 of those would be deed restricted per the 830G requirements. And so far, we've had 8 of those applications already appealed. So challenging times for Fairfield. I want to say that in Fairfield, our Plan and Zoning Commission is elected. They are 100% volunteers. They do not get paid for their time. And in the past year, instead of doing 2 meetings a month, they have met every week, almost every week for the last calendar year in order to keep up with the statutory requirements of all of these applications. It has been extraordinarily challenging, both in terms of staff, again, our volunteer elected Plan and Zoning Commission, just trying to keep up with the statutory clock. In terms of 830Gs, we have our Plan and Zoning Commission. We have several lawyers on our commission. So what I will say is that they understand the law. 67% of our 830Gs get approved. About 33% of them get denied. Of those that get denied, 46% of those get overturned. So we understand what 830G requires as a commission and as a community, and what our limitations are in terms of being a commission that has to review those and meet the threshold for health and public safety issues that override the need for affordable housing. It's a very difficult standard to meet. And in our community, it has meant, an evolution of some of our built environment. The other thing that the moratorium did, if we go to the next slide, we had the submittal of what I will call option A, which is an application that through text amendments or zone changes or just through special permit applications were applications that actually were on the road to being compliant with what our, at that time, pending Plan of Conservation and Development was looking to achieve, as well as future zoning regulations that were discussed, versus an option B application for an 830G. The example, I'll give you 2 examples in the slides. This first one is 441 Post Road. It was an obsolete 80-bed motel with a restaurant, a diner in town. Right on Route 1 in Fairfield on the Post Road, as you can see the key map on the lower right-hand corner. Generally, where you can see the red line, everything south of that is where this parcel is. And this is a motel, right? So this is where you have an exterior door to your room. You drive up, you go upstairs. It's a motel. It is one of maybe 3 hotels in our community where we have 2 universities that have 5,000 undergraduates each. So parent weekends are a hot mess. There's no place for people to stay. So we had actually done what the statute allows, which is pre-development meetings with the developer. Really wanted them to replace the hotel beds for this parcel, being on Route 1, being a university community. And so their option A was a mixed-use proposal with text changes, 250 residential units, 110 key hotel, and then they would retain the Circle diner/restaurant use. Lots of neighborhood opposition. An appeal was filed. The applicant then submitted a 478 residential unit, 100% residential unit development in Fairfield on our downtown, in our proximate to our downtown area on Route 1. As a practicing planner, I can tell you I don't really want 100% residential in this corridor. I want mixed use. And our commission wanted mixed use. So we understood the property owner's need to protect their property investment, but it's not what the town wants. So, we have to kind of navigate that moving forward. If we can go to the next slide, please. So we had actually three option A versus option B 830G submittals. This next one is directly adjacent to Black Rock Turnpike, which serves as a regional shopping corridor. It's State Route 58. It serves as a regional shopping corridor for folks who also live in Trumbull and Monroe. I like to repeat that, we've got a unicorn on this part of Black Rock Turnpike. We've got a Trader Joe's. So we have a lot of people who drive to use that Trader Joe's. And when we did a traffic safety study for this corridor several years ago, those safety studies are extraordinary. They can really tell whether people are going there to shop or whether they're driving through. This is truly a destination shopping corridor for many of the surrounding towns as well as Fairfield residents. So this is 2 parcels south of that direct commercial corridor. And option A was a very modest, utilized what we have in Fairfield, which is called a Designed Residence District Overlay. So if you look at any of the condominiums that exist within Fairfield, most of them were a DRD overlay. It requires proximity to a collector road. It allows middle housing density, which we really want to see more of. Condominiums in Fairfield, they don't list on MLS. They get scooped up by word of mouth. They're so desirable to live in. So what was proposed was a 19-unit residential development that includes keeping the existing single-family residence, which if you look at the representative rendering at top, you could see that little single-family house in front of what I believe is a 4 or 5-unit building behind it. Townhouse style, very desirable product. That had neighborhood opposition, was appealed. Option B, 830G application, 69 units, single apartment building. Not necessarily the scale that we want to see, but there's also no public health or safety issues as well. So, as an 830G application, it's right adjacent to the Black Rock Turnpike. Not that inappropriate, but again, we would rather see the 19 unit versus the 69 unit. Both applications have been appealed, so we'll see what happens. If we could go to the next slide, please. For our set-aside developments, again, we've had quite a few in Fairfield. The one on the left is within that Black Rock Turnpike corridor. It was approved in 2017. 29 units, 9 below market rate units. We average about 44 for our 830Gs. We average anywhere between 44 to 55 units per acre. That's kind of what we see when we calculate them out. That one had 38 parking spaces, 1.3 spaces per unit. And for that development, we got 21 housing unit equivalency points. And that pays $3,000 per year per unit in taxes. Our most recent set-aside development was 5545 Park Avenue. It's very close to Sacred Heart University and the Merritt Parkway. That was approved by our Plan and Zoning Commission in 2021. 100 units, 30 units of those are below market rate deed restricted. Again, 45 units per acre. 160 parking spaces, that one is 1.6 spaces per unit, and that got us 70 housing unit equivalency points. That development, being newer, pays, and I think the units are slightly bigger, that one pays about $5,300 per year per unit in taxes. So it is beneficial to our grand list to have these developments go forward. Next slide, please. What does that mean for the rents that you see, especially for these deed restricted units? As you know, with an 830G, 30% of those units need to be deed restricted for at least a minimum period of 40 years. And 30% of those, 15% of those are deed restricted at 60% AMI. 15% of those are at 80% AMI. For the calculation, if you can see on the slide, what that means in Fairfield is you have a 2-bedroom at 80% AMI that can rent for about $2,200. And at 60%, that ends up being about $1,600 based on our very high area median income. For sales unit, which we don't see that many of those, I'll be honest, 80% of AMI for, let's say, a 3-bedroom, which is a more common um, unit configuration that we see. You could sell that for 303,000 at 80% AMI or 213,000 for 60% AMI. I will tell you that one of the things that is most challenging is where we've had for sale 830G developments. Those market rate units sell for $1.4 million. So the sales prices that you see here are too big of a hit for most commercial developers to absorb, especially given the present cost of construction. So we do not see for sale product that frequently. Usually it's rentals. And if we can get them to do a market rate development, I'll get to this later in the slide, but if we can get them to a market rate product, the inclusionary at 80% makes them, it allows them to kind of break even on those units. So let's talk about our 830G moratorium application. This was filed on December 19th, 2024. 2% of Fairfield's 21,982 housing units, based on the 2020 census, required 439.64 affordable housing unit equivalents. Fairfield's application documented 462 housing unit equivalents. This allowed us to reserve 22.25 HEUs for a future second moratorium, which we hope we will achieve. This moratorium was reviewed, noticed, and approved and in effect on April 1st, 2025. Our breakdown, if we can go to the next slide, please. Our breakdown of how we got to the minimum requirement of HUEs. A majority of those were from 830G set-aside developments, about 227 points. We had about 103 points from assisted housing developments. Those are, for lack of better terminology, town-owned developments. We also have an inclusionary requirement in Fairfield. So 54 points were allotted for the inclusionary developments that we have in town, 37 for deed restricted ownership developments, and then 40 points for deed restricted rental developments. And if you just want to go to the next slide, it just has a pie chart that kind of shows how those all broke down. So about 50, just under 50% for those set aside developments. Next slide, please. So in Fairfield, what does affordable housing look like? Frankly, it runs the gamut. It can be something that is more townhouse style. It can be town owned or nonprofit owned and operated duplexes within our community. It can be traditional apartment buildings, or it can be luxury market rate apartment buildings with deed restricted units within them, which is the lower right hand example. In terms of communities that have reached the moratorium status, you can see that most of them are smaller communities. Both Milford and Fairfield are the two outliers with a significant number of housing units. So, you know, it's usually towns that are much smaller than both Fairfield and Milford, but we've both been able to achieve that even with the high number of units that we have. In talking about our second moratorium status, we think that we're actually almost there, provided, as you know, in order to submit for a moratorium, it can't just be an application for a project that is approved. You need to have a certificate of occupancy in hand. So we know that we are carrying over. So if we're looking at what that 1.5% requirement is, we need about 330 HEU points. The carryover from the prior applications, 22 points. Completed and under construction today would get us about 116 points. And then we have some approved projects, which we hope will be under construction in the next, at this point, 3.5 years that we have left in our initial moratorium. If you go to the next slide, please. So these include 980 High Street, which is in the upper left, which is a townhouse style development, which is where we get a lot of housing unit equivalency points because they have, this is done by our Fairfield Housing Authority. So they have more deeply deed restricted affordable units that will be for rent. In the middle was an 830G project that has 40 units. This was approved and not appealed. So rare in Fairfield, but that one's a 40 unit just north of Kings Highway, which is one of our secondary commercial corridors in Fairfield. The upper right was initially an 830G application, and through settlement, because this is right in our downtown area, we reached a settlement with the property owner who was going to do an 830G and do 100% residential building in an area that is right next to the downtown community theater. So we wanted this to be a mixed-use project, and we were able to reach a settlement agreement with this developer. That's going to be a 50-unit project, but we are getting ground floor commercial, which we feel very strongly about. Lower left and lower right, these are two projects in that Fairfield Black Rock train station area. So these are obviously a different scale. As I remind the community, and we don't really have that much community um, I guess, outpouring in that neighborhood because we're building a neighborhood from scratch. This area where the Fairfield Black Rock train station is used to be industrial uses that employed 6,000 people within our community. So having these convert to residential apartment buildings, which we estimate will house probably about 2,500 to 3,000 people, not even close to being the same amount of traffic generation. So, it allows us really to kind of um, add much needed housing diversity within Fairfield. Um, of the two lower apartment buildings, the one on the left is a third project by developers in town. They were one of the first developers to really do a mixed use project in Fairfield. If you've been in town, it's where the Sally's is on the ground floor, Sally's Pizza. Um, just anecdotally, what that developer tells us is 30% of who lives in that initial 101 unit building, 30% of those are single males who are divorced dads. So even if you think you don't need multifamily in your community, with a national divorce rate of 50%, you do to keep families together. So if we go to the next slide, please. So Fairfield has been struggling with affordable housing and how we best protect and care for our residents for a very long time. Before it was required by 830J, Fairfield had started the work with looking at its affordable housing needs back in 1985 with a special task force to look at the rising housing costs within the community. That task force resulted in the town's first affordable housing plan in 1988. A permanent affordable housing committee was established in 2007, and we've since updated our affordable housing plan in 2014 and in 2022. So Fairfield is committed to this effort. We have and this is not unique to Fairfield, but throughout Connecticut, because we are older communities, we are seeing a lot of residential and commercial building functional obsolescence. Um, Frankly, our buildings are reaching the end of their functional lifetimes, both in our commercial corridors and both for single family houses. So that means that we see a lot of redevelopment. Um, Within Fairfield, if we can go to the next slide, please. Within Fairfield, 95.5% of our land is zoned for residential use. Um, of that land that is zoned residential, 93% of that is single family residential only. So that doesn't give us tons of opportunity for mixed use. But what I will say is, as a suburb of Bridgeport, who was an industrial engine for so long, we do have, as of right, duplex zoning, as of right, up to 4-family zoning, but those zones are very limited. So we need to figure out how to provide more diverse housing options in a place where we've got, if you look at that dark green area and some of the light green areas that are adjacent to it, those are areas where we still don't have sewer service, and there's no plan to expand the sewer service into those areas. So we have to be really intentional about where we have pre-existing development and pre-existing infrastructure. If we can go to the next slide, please. In partnership, our Plan and Zoning Commission with our Affordable Housing Committee has looked at a couple of different tools that we hope will help diversify housing stock in Fairfield moving forward. One of them has been inclusionary zoning. So when you are building a market rate development over 10 units in the town of Fairfield, you have to provide at least 10% of those as deed restricted affordable for the lifetime of the building at 80% AMI. In our TOD areas like Fairfield Black Rock Station, the percentage jumps up to 12%. And we just had a commercial property owner do a zone change in the downtown area that jumps that to 20%. Our commission wanting to see projects actually constructed and our concern about the functional financial viability of that, we might go down to 15%. We'll see. Next slide, please. We are also, as you might imagine, with 3 Metro North train stations, prioritizing transit-oriented development. Our elected legislative body did recently, as they like to say, approve a first date with the CMDA, right? That we've entered into that relationship, and we're going to continue in that process to see whether we're a good fit. But we do think that we have done a lot of work for revising our zoning regulations to allow for transit-oriented development, in particular in the Fairfield Black Rock train station, and also, we hope, in the downtown train station. So if we could go to the next one. The Fairfield Black Rock train station, as you can see, I don't know if it's any surprise to those on in the working committee, but DOT is also looking at the train station parking lots. This one in particular at Fairfield Black Rock, they own that property with a tripartite lease agreement to the developer. If you see the green parcel to the left, that site has been approved for about 350 units. We'd like to see it go upwards of 600 units. So we'd like the developer to come in and do something a little more dense in terms of the proposal. So we'll see what happens. But what I will say is that this has been a huge economic driver for us in this area. As many of you know, we were the headquarters for GE, and then GE left for other areas, other states. The town was concerned about what that hit to the grand list would be. 3 multifamily developments replaced GE's grand list hit to us. So it was fortuitous timing. But it also provided us with a way to understand that multifamily is just as valuable as a large commercial property owner and tenant. We can go to the next slide, please. That's okay. Oh, just back up one. So I just want to also reiterate that reviews and approvals do not equal construction. These are very challenging construction times for our developers. Interest rates are high, construction materials are very expensive, and land costs, in particular in Fairfield, are extraordinarily high. So, if we look at all of the inclusionary developments that we have authorized, so again, these are market rate developments, not 830Gs. There have been about approaching 1,600 units that have been proposed. 1,400 of those have been approved. So far, we've only had 367 of those actually constructed. So it's challenging times for developers. Go to the next slide, please. Our inclusionary developments on the left-hand side, this is a project that was done with that design residence district overlay. 90 units just north of the Fairfield downtown train station. About 28 units per acre, 170 parking spaces, 1.9 parking spaces per unit. That did give us 13.5 housing unit equivalency points. That unit, it's a luxury apartment building. It pays about $7,800 per unit in taxes. And there's only 7 children in this development. 90 units, only 7 children. So we get this a lot, this question. The one that you can see on the right, 665 Commerce Drive, this was our first mixed-use development in the Black Rock Turnpike, in the Fairfield Black Rock train station corridor. That was approved back in 2015, 101 units, 11 below market rate units, about 40 units per acre, 187 parking spaces, 1.85 parking spaces per unit. They are overparked. We gave them a waiver for 10 parking spaces, the commission, and they still have an empty parking lot as part of their development. So going down to 1.25 units, 1.25 spaces per unit is appropriate in TOD areas. I just want to confirm that. That development pays about $6,400 per unit per year in taxes, and there are 10 children in that development. Another tool that we utilize in Fairfield is an affordable housing trust fund. Every development that doesn't include either deed restricted affordable, including if you have a single family house and you have to tear down that house and build a new single family house, we have a $5 per $1,000 of construction cost affordable housing fee that is required of folks when they come and apply for their permit in the Plan and Zoning Department. This has become a very important local source for dedicated funding for us to achieve our affordable housing goals in Fairfield. This provides really important support for land acquisitions for the town to do its own projects, for affordable housing assessment, those soft costs, providing that funding for our partner developers who help us with affordable housing projects to do the architectural plans, site reviews, that type of thing. This was created in 2018 by ordinance, and we average about $300,000 a year in revenue from that Affordable Housing Trust Fund based on our current permitting stream. However, what I will say is I think that'll probably see a decrease in the years moving forward. As I mentioned, we have Fairfield U and Sacred Heart that were going through exponential growth. They were adding many, 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 many dormitories, and now they're probably not. So we won't see as much money, but it's been good while it lasted. The other tool, I just want to provide, if we go to the next slide, sorry. So this is one of our Housing Trust Fund aided projects. We are doing a partnership with the Habitat for Humanity on town-owned land called Greenfield Street. So this is 2 duplexes that are constructed by Habitat in partnership. We purchased a piece of this property with our Housing Trust Fund monies. We spent $232,000. These are going to be 2 duplexes, each 4-bedroom, 2-bath. Habitat, a lot of times the folks that they see occupy these units are extended families living together. So, your abuelas and your lolas, or, whatever your nonas, living with their children and their grandchildren. So we expect this to be completed. It's almost 100% complete towards the end of this month. So they should be getting their COs. Next slide, please. The other thing that our Affordable Housing Committee really wanted us to work on was revising our affordable dwelling unit regulations. We've had ADU regulations since the mid-'80s, but only for attached ADUs, and they felt it was time that we really opened up those regulations a bit to look at detached ADUs. Since we revised our regulations in 2022, we've had 37 ADU applications townwide. I know that doesn't seem like tons, but every unit that can house a family that wants to stay in town, a lot of times what we see is that mismatch between that empty nester household who wants to stay in the community where all their friends are, where their volunteer activities are, but they really don't need a 4-bedroom house anymore. So we're seeing a lot of parents build an ADU for themselves, move in their kids who otherwise couldn't afford the price of admission into Fairfield, and then be able to have proximity to their grandkids and also give their grandkids the same education that their kids got. So it's for Fairfielders, it's really important to maintain that intergenerational relationship. And then lastly, we get asked this all the time. Oh, but multifamily, it's going to negatively impact our schools. Every year we get the enrollment list, redacted, of course, from our public schools, and we look at how many students our multifamily, anything over 10 units, generates within town. What we will say is a lot of the older condominiums are 3-bedroom plus. Those are where the children live. A lot of the new units that we're seeing in production are 2 bedrooms and less. That's not where the children are. So, unfortunately, what we do see, if you go to the next slide, is, a lot of our 830Gs, they go where the infrastructure is located, as well as where those main commuter corridors are. So whether it's 95, the Merritt Parkway, Route 1, or near one of the train stations. So we do see a bit more development on our more highly developed neighborhoods right now. And so I will say that we do get a little bit of feedback from our residential communities that it's a lot. So we understand that, but that's all I have, and I'm certainly happy to answer any questions that anyone may have. Thank you so much for your time, and I do actually need to thank our our economic and community development director, Mark Barnhart. I stole a lot of these slides from him.
Thank you very much. We'll go to questions after our next
Okay.
presentation. So, um, I thank you, thank you. That was very comprehensive and excellent. We appreciate it. Jonathan, thank you for being here. We do appreciate it as well. And you're up.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Thanks for having me, everyone. Again, Jonathan Reiner. I'm the Director of Planning and Development Services for the town of Groton. Next slide. And I think everybody knows where Groton is in town. Groton, we have our little fiefdoms, the city of Groton, Noank, Groton Long Point, the boroughs that we have within the community, which always makes for a fun conversation when we try to do things as a whole community. Next slide. And I think, a lot of folks know about kind of what we talk about the big three in Groton, our big three employers of Electric Boat General Dynamics, Pfizer, and the Navy base, and how that drives a lot of what happens really in southeastern Connecticut. And often what people don't know a little bit, kind of the tale of two Grotons I'd like to talk about sometimes. So, we have a total population a little over 38,000. We have over 33,000 jobs in the town. 82% of our workforce commutes to Groton. I've seen that number creep up a little bit in the time that I've been working for the town. And some staggering statistics are 49% of our public school students qualify for free or reduced lunch, while at the same time, 40% of our homeowners in town don't have a mortgage because they've paid it off. We also have 23% of our year-round housing stock is affordable. So there's really a big difference. I've worked in a number of municipalities over my career, and it's such a big difference between the haves and the have-nots in Groton. And from a 830G perspective, again, we have 23% of our year-round housing stock is affordable. So we don't have any affordable housing problems. So I think we can wrap up the presentation and take some questions. But that's what we often hear, right? Oh, we got this solved. Why do we need more affordable housing, right? Wrong. And again, I've been working for the town as the planning director for about 11 years now. And we get a lot of pushback about why do we need more housing? We have enough housing, and why can't others build it? And that's been a big question that's been pushing us for a lot of years. So back in 2021, 2023, and then just recently, we did some housing market analyses. And our most recent one that we did looked at two different scenarios, both for the town as well as the region. And to meet basic demand, not to bring prices down, not to stabilize rent, we need somewhere between 4,000 and 5,500 housing units in Groton alone. And when I talk about these numbers, I get pushback from folks of, well, why us? Why can't the surrounding communities build it? Oh, well, they have that need too. So we say, we're going to really step it up in this analysis. In just our surrounding municipalities, kind of within our job watershed, we're looking at a need for somewhere between 17 and 18,000 housing units. So, drastic numbers and this is what's needed in the next 10 years. And we often hear about, a lot of you as legislators, what do communities want? We want low taxes, we want stable services, but I don't want that four-letter word of density. That's just a bad thing. And all of those things, if you get some of those, they start having other side effects that people often don't expect. And really having those three scenarios does not exist. And what often happens is you create this market in a lot of communities that there is no abundance, but instead there is scarcity in a lot of our housing markets. And we've seen this across Connecticut, across New England, and really across a lot of areas in the country. And a lot of it is driven by who our decision makers are. And, sorry for, those in the room that may remember the Leave It to Beaver household and watching those on TV. But when I look at our land use commissions in Groton, the majority of the folks that make decisions in Groton are old, they're white, they're male, they live in Groton, Long Point, Noank, and Mystic, and they're all retired. And they still have this mentality of a certain housing type that's needed within the community that doesn't exist. And what we've seen over the past number of years is our population is going down, but our aging population is continuing to go up. And this is not just a Groton phenomenon. Emmeline spoke about a number of these things. What we've really seen is since the 1950s, our average persons per household has dropped by almost half. And, as planners, we get challenged a lot of why do we need all this new housing? Our population is going down. Our school age children ratio is going down. I don't understand why we need more housing. Well, just simple demographics of if you have the same population, but our household size has dropped down to 2 instead of almost 4, we need 100% more houses just to populate the same people. And what often happens is the housing that's built is one type versus getting smaller units and things that might actually fit the need of our households, but that's often not allowed within zoning. A lot of places, a lot of suburban communities like us, single family zoning is allowed throughout the municipality. We have some districts that are single family only zoning. And when we've tried to change that, have gotten tremendous pushback from the community. And having those areas where you can have smaller units or ADUs are often illegal in a lot of communities. But building a little bit off of what Emmeline had said, in Groton, we've allowed accessory dwelling units by right for a very long time. This past year, I think we got about 12 ADUs. The majority of them were all built in Mystic, and the price points on them are $300,000 to $400,000 to construct an ADU that's less than 1,000 square feet. Again, it's not only shrinking household size, but it's also the increase in the size of the houses themselves. When we think about missing middle housing, which I'll start talking about a little bit more, some of that, it's the houses are getting too big, or expectations of what people want is just a little bit too outsized for really what the market can bear. And again, when we look at, and I'm sure if we did this statistics in many other municipalities that a number of you represent, you'd see similar numbers, that 70% of our households are 1 and 2 person households. It's those divorced folks, widowers, whatever you have it, or just households that are starting and trying to form. Yet the majority of our housing type is very different than what we need. I think in my own neighborhood, there are a number of single folks that are almost 70 years old living in houses that have 3 bedrooms that they don't even use the upstairs anymore. And they've lived in the town their whole lives, but they can't move anywhere because what's new is crazy expensive, and there aren't even those 1-bedroom type of places available for them. Next slide. And then further to compound that, I don't know if any of you have been looking for houses in the past 5 or 6 years. One of the things that you see that happens is those that have the resources start pushing out the people that don't have the resources. And this is something that a number of municipalities, a number of folks that I know or work with hadn't seen initially for or understanding it until they started having to buy a house on their own. Oh, okay. Sorry, we lost our slides there. But really what it gets into is if those with financial resources can buy those kind of starter homes or fixer-uppers, they're then going to start pushing out the folks that maybe could have afforded those places before. And you start seeing those that have resources continuously push down on that housing ladder to those that are the most vulnerable end up without a house, and they end up homeless in some instances. And oh, you got it. Okay, excellent. So next slide. The lack of the right kind of housing really increases housing costs. And I think a lot of you can think about during COVID, there was a shortage of used automobiles. We saw prices of cars skyrocket because the manufacturers weren't creating things. It's the same analogy. I often use that analogy because a lot of folks that have lived in the same house for 20, 30, 40 years, they don't realize how much their house is worth and how much the cost has gone up. Next slide. Again, looking at national affordability, where prices have gone over the past 20, 30 years, things have really skyrocketed, both home prices and rents. Next slide. In Groton, our area median income, around $83,000. Our median house value is $361,000. And on the next slide, you'll see the change in median household income in the last 10 years has only gone up by a little under 10%. Yet, if you were to buy a new home today, that mortgage payment has gone up by almost 86%. Drastic numbers for people trying to enter the market. Some of that is cost of construction, some of that is lack of availability, some of that is interest rates. And then on the next slide, that same spot, looking at renters, in Groton, their income has actually gone down a little bit, yet rentals have gone up by almost 19% in that same time period. What we're seeing is due to cost burdens, income disparity, household size decreases, less kids, the hiring growth of Electric Boat General Dynamics, our commuting pattern. We're really seeing that a lot of strong homeowners, a lot of strong earners can't even find a place to live in a lot of communities due to the lack of housing availability. So, what have we in Groton been doing? Back in 2019, we did a complete rewrite of our zoning regulations. We've done 3 different housing market analyses. I'll talk about those in a minute. And we recently started doing a missing middle housing study. We got some funding from the Department of Defense because we have the Navy base and General Dynamics within the community. And we're really looking at what can we do to start solving this crisis. We have economic development strategies we've developed. We are doing tremendous amounts of outreach and engagement, community conversations on hot topics and other items to try to demystify planning and housing in some of these things. We also have a number of town excess properties. I think a lot of suburban and urban communities, we've seen this pattern of empty schools, our school age population dropping. We have some schools that have been vacant for 20, 30, 40 years. Some of them, the town has been talking about what to do with the Mystic Education Center for longer than I've been alive. And we still don't have a solution on it, working with the state on what the long-term plan for that has been or should be. And right now we're currently working on our plan of conservation and development. So back around 2020, we were getting a lot of pushback of, you keep talking about this need for housing. We don't believe it. We don't understand it. And what do you really mean here? So we worked with Camoin and Associates, an economic development firm, and said, we want to do a housing market analysis to look at, so it's slide number 29 that we're on right now. We want to look at, go back a few. It's the one on the 2021 housing market study. Keep going, keep going. Keep going. One more back. Right there. Thank you. Okay. And we did this housing market study, and it showed that we need 5,200 housing units to meet basic demand. We looked at a number of parameters, the hiring that was going on at EB within the town, in the region, our commuter rates, and really kind of dialed in on this. And wow, that was a big number for us. We didn't think it was going to be quite that big. Next slide. Then, we get into a couple of years of COVID and we started getting some pushback of, I just think that was a bubble in COVID. We don't really need 5,200 housing units. You need to redo that study. Fine, we'll redo that study. We now need 6,450 new units of housing in town. And often what happens sometimes in communities like ours is you start getting a little bit of paralysis by analysis. People want more studies. They want, well, we need to analyze this. And why don't we have this data? And what I've kind of talked to my community about is, fortunately, we've been able to get grants and outside funding to do some of these analyses that a lot of other communities don't have the benefit of this stuff. So we need to take the best available data that we have and start making decisions. And there continues to still be pushback on this and what the need for housing is and the ways of getting it. And we've seen very little actually get constructed over the past few years. Next slide. So then we said, you know what, we're going to put together a project working with DoD, and we wanted to look at future demand and supply. And this is a $350,000 study looking at missing middle housing. Next slide. And we updated this study again. It had a number of key findings. And yeah, this is that study where we looked at not only the housing in Groton, but also within the community. And what we saw is that, again, despite household growth, our population is declining. Electric boat is driving regional and housing demand. And our population is aging at a faster rate than the rest of the region and the state. So, things that we knew, but again, starting to really put this on paper so we could point to this data. And we are losing out on that missing middle housing, that housing that is often affordable, but not deed restricted affordable. And a really key component that we haven't been building in a lot of jurisdictions. Costs have outpaced income, creating more affordability gaps. I know this is things you've probably all heard. And that a lot of renters are facing cost burdens. Homeownership is becoming increasingly inaccessible, and looking at, I know Emmeline was talking about that recent UConn graduate that she has, but even people making median incomes can't afford to rent or to live within a community any longer. Again, we are a net importer of commuters for the amount of jobs that we have. And getting into that updated kind of scenario of the housing need, that 41 to 5,500, based on some different scenarios, because of the flux and kind of softening of the larger economy. Originally, we thought as people move from one job sector, taking into jobs at EB or General Dynamics, we would see some of those jobs backfilled. Because the economy is getting a little softer, those jobs haven't been backfilled. So we've seen some of those numbers come down. But those are still staggering numbers to what we need to build in the town and in the region over the next 10 years. And missing middle housing are small single families, are duplexes, tris, quads, ADUs, and that multifamily units of, like, say, buildings of like 19 units or less. That is where the demand exists. That's our greatest need. And again, one of the biggest hurdles we've been coming up against is a lot of NIMBYism, a lot of people that don't want change, that fear that change, create misunderstanding, spread a lot of misinformation. I've had people tell me that they blatantly spread misinformation to stop projects because they don't want to see things happen. And these are people that generally live in these very well-to-do areas, and they don't understand the needs of the many in our community. And we've been seeing a lot of the pitting of conservation versus development. That's a fight that's been happening in Groton for a long time. Back before I started, there were a number of larger developments that were proposed in the mid 2000s, late 2000s, early 2010s that were appealed through the regulatory process, and then were later purchased as open space, is just a way of stopping development within certain areas of town. And it's really a vocal minority in that silent majority that we see. Again, when we think about some of the costs of development, things that happen is infrastructure that we have to supply as a municipality is a constant, whether it's an area that's 3 or 4 units per acre or it's 20 units per acre. And we start seeing this kind of Ponzi scheme of suburban development, and we have to have new development to help pay for the maintaining of the infrastructure of the old. And at low density development, it's really difficult to pay for that water, the sewer, the police, and all the other things that we as a municipality do. And that creates this financial disaster and scarcity. We're fortunate in Groton to have Electric Boat, General Dynamics, and Pfizer to help keep our mill rate down. But a lot of other communities that fight development then come up against this problem where their budgets are a complete disaster and they can't give municipalities the basic services that they need. And a way around that a little bit is, as Emmeline was talking about, missing middle housing, 1 and 2 bedroom studio type units, smaller units actually pay for themselves when you look at it from a taxing perspective. And it helps create and solve that housing shortage problem. So the DADU, the DADU, is a detached accessory dwelling unit. Single family homes, duplexes, single families with attached or detached accessory dwelling units, duplexes. Some of these have become 4-letter words. People think it's a derogatory term to reference that they live next to or across the street or, my God, in a duplex. And we've seen that happen just even the last week. And over the weekend, I was dealing with some email traffic on that. Next slide. And as we allow and create more housing choices, you start seeing the bottom line really stabilize for a lot of municipal budgets. And, I don't know if everyone's heard some of these, we've all heard about NIMBY or YIMBY, but maybe some of you have heard the Citizens Against Virtually Everything, build absolutely nothing anywhere near anything, and not over there either was a newer one that I had heard recently. So just, keep those in your repertoire of some of the things that we see. And a lot of this is balancing that need and the misinformation and trying to talk to people at their level and meet them where they are to like what reality is when it comes to development. We do see some people around the town, and I'm sure in some of your own jurisdictions, where I support affordable housing, I support new development, but just not here. Or yeah, let's get more affordable housing, but let's not build any new housing in town. Let's just make more of the existing housing affordable. Who's going to pay for that? It doesn't exist. Again, as I said, in Groton, we have this fight sometimes with conservation versus development. Almost 30% of Groton is conserved open space. It is protected land. That's a drastic, it's a huge number. As someone who I got into this field initially through environmentalism, coastal management, and environmental planning. And now a lot of my work and focus has been more on economic development and housing because folks aren't going to be concerned about issues like climate change, sea level rise, or the environment if they can't even have a safe place to live, if they can't put food on the table for their kids and have shelter, just the basic needs. Open space and some of the other problems that we're dealing with as a society are not going to be dealt with from folks. And again, our old plan of conservation development is something that we're working on now. And how do we balance a number of these items as we look to the future? Again, we know Connecticut is in a housing crisis. It's something that all of you were doing a great job working on last year. And I know you're going to be meeting more looking at housing reforms. Next slide. And, one of the things that we've actually been able to start hitting some home runs with are some of our underutilized public property. So that picture on the top, the Mystic Education Center, a state-owned property, is an opportunity for us. But then we also see sometimes before we even start publicly talking about what to use or what to do with some of these excess properties, neighborhoods come out and just start pushing against any potential use on that property. And it starts becoming a little bit of a zero-sum game. And these sometimes properties look gorgeous from the outside, but after they sit around for 10, 20, 40 years, they start falling apart. And what could be a tremendous asset, a historical asset for a community, becomes a liability. With that said, we do have a process that we do. We have a whole process for handling excess municipal property, working with our town council, with our representative town meeting, doing RFPs, really trying to work with developers to get those public-private partnerships, but they take time and there's a big need for transparency and a lot of distrust from the community about us doing things to try to dispose of these properties when we are trying to be as transparent and open as possible, but some things have to happen within an executive session when you're negotiating for property. But again, as Emmeline had said, these can be amazing economic drivers for communities while not only increasing the grand list, doing good things for our tax base, but also creating that housing that is really needed. So this here is Triton Square, the site of the former Sealy School. That school was closed, I think, sometime in the late 80s, early 90s and sat vacant. Our Parks and Rec department used it for a long time. And the town had been talking about things to do there for a long time. And I think around 2018, we finally got a request for proposals out on the out on the street, and they are just getting up their certificates of occupancy now. Prior to that being a development, it wasn't giving us any tax revenue. That one development now we're estimating is going to be north of $1.2 million a year, with about a mind-boggling 12 or so school-age children in that 304 unit development. So the sky is not going to fall. Our schools aren't going to become overpopulated. Again, it's that needed missing middle housing. Spoke about before, we're doing a lot of outreach, these community conversations, and we're getting to people that we normally couldn't talk to before or didn't come out, but it's still a lot of the same faces, and it's still really difficult no matter how much outreach and engagement that we do. And, again, how can we provide those stable services? We need to have the housing that fits the community. You want to stabilize your tax base. You want to have good, vibrant economic development. Housing is a key component to that. That missing middle housing, our Meeting in the Middle Solutions project, we started it just a couple months ago. We'll be wrapping it up kind of June, July timeframe, and we hope to have some real changes within our zoning regulations. Again, if we don't get toppled over by those that fear change, those that don't want duplexes or triplexes in their neighborhoods, even though they already exist. We did a walking tour of downtown Mystic on Thursday to show the amount of duplexes, triplexes, accessory dwelling units, captain's houses, which are these mansions that now might have 4, 6, 8, 12 units within them. Density hiding in plain sight, the areas that when we think about when we go on vacation or we want to visit, those amazing places are often some of the most dense populations in development that we've seen. Again, we just did an inventory looking around at some of those housing stock in town. And it's funny, some of the pushback that we get from folks of, well, my house isn't a duplex. Well, yes, it is. Well, I'm trying to make it not a duplex anymore. And just, again, that duplex and triplex really has become a 4-letter word in a lot of communities. And, kind of wrapping things up and looking at what is next. So, again, we're a community, we're not subject to 830G. We still have drastic problems and issues housing those in our community and those that want to live within our community. I think one of the biggest challenges we face are the folks that aren't interested in seeing change. I hate to generalize or stereotype the not in my backyard syndrome, but it really is there. If folks had to buy a new home or had, I try to tell people, think about where you first lived, the first place you rented or owned. Was it an accessory dwelling unit? Was it a duplex? Was it a small, kind of cringy apartment? That was a lot of our housing journey that we experienced. But I think as folks get into their home, they often forget kind of how they got to where they are. And there really is no silver bullet approach. We're trying to throw the kitchen sink at this with a lot of different ideas, and really appreciate the time that all of you gave us today. And Emmeline and I are happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Thanks for your again, a very comprehensive conversation and report and everything else. Emily, why don't you come on up, and you both can just both drag chairs right there if you want together at the desk. And we'll open it up to online and also to questions as well. And I'll start off with Senator Marks.
Thank you. Thank you both. It was great. And I am the senator of the 20th district, which is New London, to Old Saybrook, Salem, Basra, Montville. So I have 8 very, very different towns, very different towns. Emmeline, you had mentioned that 47% of the 830G projects that then go get denied and then they go back, what is the main reason why they get denied the second time?
So I think that statistic was actually based on initial denials and then the court action.
Yeah.
So oftentimes the court will find that there is not a if it's appealed by neighbors, for example, if an approval is given by our commission and it's appealed by neighbors, the neighbors have not provided a quantifiable public health and safety issue that overrides the need for affordable housing. So it is, I think, as John has expressed, a lot of fear and expressed fear about, oh, this will generate so much traffic, or, you know, it's the fire department's not going to have access. Most of our applications, when they're building their record through the Plan and Zoning Commission review, we have our fire department look at it. We have our police department look at it. We have our engineering department look at it. So when the record expresses one thing and neighbors based on fear express another, unfortunately, that's oftentimes where we will get overturned. Was that the question? I hope I answered it.
So that gets overturned for positive development.
Correct.
But why does it get overturned so that it doesn't get developed?
You know, we haven't had too many that have been upheld. I think we've had of the lawsuits, of the denials that the town has provided for 830Gs, I think we've only had 2 that have been upheld. The majority of them, you know, again, either it's an approval, sometimes it's a denial, and then that denial is overturned by the commission, but it's very rare that we're upheld with 830Gs.
Okay. And then I guess I just don't understand the moratorium, why municipalities want a moratorium. If you said, you know, you have a son who can't, you know, rent in Fairfield and where he lived, and I don't know if you want to build a $400,000 ADU. That sounds like a lot of money to me. And I know I am a divorced woman in her 60s, so I guess it's our fault that the housing market is just collapsing, right? God forbid. And the reason for that is many of the divorced women in their 60s didn't really start saving for retirement until they were older because they were the caretakers of their children. So that is our equity, and we are going to sleep in that house until the day we die. So, and we should be able to do that. But I just don't understand why municipalities want a moratorium when we have such a huge need for housing. Everybody, all you hear about is, oh, General Dynamics left, but you built 3 housing units that then paid for the tax revenue that you lost, and how great it's been as an economic growth for Fairfield. And you know, the CBIA reports came out, I forgot what it was called, and they just talked about the millions and billions of dollars that Connecticut is losing. So why does Fairfield want a moratorium? I want people to want to build. I really, truly, living in New London, we are building as fast as we can, and we don't have that much NIMBYism because we're all just thrilled to get more people into our downtown area.
We want to build as well, but we want to build mixed use. And 830G, our issue with 830G is it's 100% residential. Oftentimes in our commercial corridor, we want ground floor commercial. We've got a sizable population. Only 5% of our area is zoned commercial. We experience very heavy traffic because we have limited commercial opportunities. So everybody's driving to the same thing. We want to place more people where activity is. So I would say that for us, the moratorium is more about controlling the narrative and the built environment instead of prohibiting future units in town. We really want to control what that envelope looks like. We want it close to the street, for example. We don't want parking in front of our buildings. We understand that our downtown Fairfield is a model because it's old, built before the automobile, where it's very walkable. It's amazing. But we really need to be intentional if that's what we end up with in some of the other areas of town, where, as I spoke about, those buildings are functionally obsolete. They're down a pathway for redevelopment. And John and I can probably speak to this, but as municipal planners, you start to know where the next places that's going to pop because people start making appointments. And there are places in Fairfield that are ripe for redevelopment, and maybe the neighbors don't know about it, but we have a preview to that experience. And we want that development to be pedestrian oriented, mixed use with ground floor commercial. Because that's what, I mean, yes, the housing units are all fantastic, but I want ground floor commercial. So I want the moratorium in place so that I don't have to choose between the development that we want to see versus the development that we get. It's not the housing units that I'm against. I want the ground floor commercial. So for that's Fairfield's burden.
Okay. I don't know. We have commercial. There's a lot of empty commercial, right? Too. I don't understand
Not
that, but you're a
yeah.
planner, I'm a nurse. So
Well, not in Fairfield. So we have a very low vacancy rate in our commercial buildings because we have a population of 62,000 with 10,000 of those university students who like to shop. So, I think for us, every commercial opportunity in Fairfield, is valuable to us. And we want to make sure that we're replicating that built environment instead of it being 100% residential because we're kind of missing out if we don't end up with that ground floor commercial.
okay. And then, I mean, both of you are in communities that, Electric Boats, the Coast Guard, Avery Point, your colleges. How much has the short-term rental market, this doesn't have to do with 830G, but how much has the short-term rental market affected the number of properties on the market for housing?
So in Groton, we have less than 300 short-term rentals within the town. So is it an easy target? Is it something that people talk about a lot? As this has caused our housing crisis, they talk about it, but in all reality, it's 300 units. We need 5,000 units. That 300 is a drop in the bucket. And the majority of those, in a community like Groton, along the coastline, Groton Long Point has always had short-term rentals. No Inc., although now they're prohibited, has, I think, historically. The same with Mystic. Have we seen people buy up homes and turn them into short-term rentals? Certainly, we saw a lot of that during COVID. Since then, we've adopted regulations that make it pretty difficult to develop new short-term rentals. There's some very strict standards around them and only allowed in a few places. But even those units that were bought before, a few of them might have been in the moderately priced range, but now it's in Mystic and people have fixed them up and they're $1 million homes now. So on the one hand, it's great from a tax revenue generating perspective, and people want to visit Mystic, and it's helped our taxes in Mystic and state taxes from hotels and beverages taxes. But then has it taken a little bit of housing away in some of these areas? Yes. Is it as drastic as people I think often get concerned about? No, again, less than 300 units.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
And I would say in Fairfield, we used to have a summer residence, neighborhoods, and now those have gone pretty much year-round residents. We do have a lot of rentals we have academic rentals because we have the two colleges and universities, and then those become summer rentals over the summertime. I agree with John. I think we just need more units all around. So I don't feel like it's that much of a conflict. I feel that the new units that are coming online, they're pretty much occupied at about 85% before the CO's even issued. So we just have such high demand for new housing stock.
Thank you. Any other questions? David?
This working? Okay, great. Thanks for your presentations. I thought they were both very informative. I have a question first for Fairfield. Have you found that the 30 or so, 38 830G applications you've gotten, are they consistent with what your affordable housing plan has laid out in the years where you've had a plan?
No, no, but I do feel like they do provide different units on the marketplace than what we have presently. So again, I will say that most of the 830Gs are 2 bedrooms, 1 bedrooms, studios. That's not something that we have in the marketplace very commonly within Fairfield. So again, it does provide that opportunity for those divorced dads, for those widowed households, for, our universities have grown where now they provide PhD opportunities, and we need housing for graduate students within Fairfield. Right now, we are sharing that housing burden with our neighbors in Trumbull and Bridgeport. But we would like to be able to provide more housing opportunities for those students as well.
Maybe you could explain how are they not consistent with the affordable housing plans?
I think in some ways, our affordable housing plan has been looking at sites more than the type of development. What I will say is that, we've mapped our 830Gs before. Most of them are within very close proximity to commercial corridors and main shopping corridors. So I think where that's concerned, it is consistent because we are looking for transitional middle housing opportunities, not, as the donut hole in the middle of a single family neighborhood, but adjacent to areas where there is opportunity for employment and access to, medical treatments and shopping and transportation. We have Bridgeport Transit Authority runs through many of our state roads within our town. And again, we're so lucky that we have 3 train stations. So what I will say is that developers tend to target those development sites that, given those market rate opportunities will lease, will rent really well. That they're in areas where those market rate units, can be marketed. So we're not seeing them in the middle of nowhere. So I will say in terms of that consistency with our affordable housing plan, it is meeting those desired outcomes.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the really surprising things that came from your presentation was how many units are authorized and approved by 830G and then just not built. That is very perplexing because I mean, 830G is an extremely expensive process to go through. Why would, I mean, do you have any insights about why that's happening?
Cost of construction and construction lending costs right now are very high. So I think oftentimes we hear from developers that if there's a market rate way to move forward, especially when you have, for us, our AMI at 80% is pretty high. So again, the developers break even on those units. When you're doing an 830G, where 30% and 15% of that, half of that 30% for the deed restricted has to be at 60%, they're taking a loss on the construction of those units. So that's what we've heard from our development communities. They just can't make it pencil out, even if they have the entitlement in hand.
And to further expand on that, in Groton right now, we have 1,200 units that have been approved by planning and zoning, ready to go. Building permit applications have not been submitted yet. These are all market rate type developments, and just the numbers are still difficult to pencil out on these units. So some of them are large 400 unit multifamily developments, some of them, 100 or so, and a little bit of everything in between. And we're, often people, oh, well, we're solving our housing crisis. We got 1,200 units approved until building permits are issued, until hammers are swinging, foundations are being poured. Those units aren't really there yet. And a lot of it is the cost of construction, even on market rate units, not even having an affordable piece on there. There was a developer we were talking to recently about having some level of affordability, and they needed tax incentives in order to make that work. And that's not something that we've given out on multifamily.
And one more question, okay? Okay, thanks. This is just a question for both of you. I'm curious what you think your communities would, how you think your communities approach the whole as of right commercial to residential component that's in the housing bill.
So we do have some Class C office space where we have had applications to convert those to 100% residential. I would say that those are on the fringe areas of commercial, so we are supportive of some of those conversions, especially when they're adjacent to pre-existing condominium developments, for example. It makes sense to allow for those conversions at that point. Right on the post road, right on Black Rock Turnpike. I think we'd prefer ground floor commercial as part of that. I kind of joke with my commission that for these 830Gs that we've seen come forward, we have had over the past, within the time that I've been in Fairfield, which has been 8 years, we did have one application in particular where they proposed ground floor commercial, and we checked with DOH, and they're like, well, it's not really an 830G if it has commercial. And so I've joked with my commission, we should just have a regulation that as long as they maintain the same percentage of affordability, will allow them to convert the ground floor to commercial. So we'll see.
Yeah, I don't know if we'll see a lot of change with that within Groton. We have some older tired commercial centers, but I don't think there'd be really a ton of applicability of that residential by right in commercial. You know, if it was some of the older schools, maybe it would help a little bit with the development process. But again, I don't know how applicable it would really be there.
And-
Thank you.
Just to follow up, and we have heard too that going from commercial to residential is very expensive. So it doesn't always work for every pre-existing non-functional commercial building to be able to pencil out either.
Thank you, Dave. Any other questions? Okay. No other questions? Thank you. Any other questions?
Right here.
Oh,
Senator.
First Selectman Marconi.
Thank you. To Fairfield, I first want to extend our condolences to the town for the loss of Bill Gerber. He was a good guy and did a lot of good work for Fairfield, so I'm sure you're missing him. You had mentioned in your presentation some units that the 22, 23 points that you were holding for a future moratorium. New Canaan went through this and were told that they could not reserve previous build outs once the moratorium was issued, that everything was fresh going forward. Is there any accuracy to that? There was a lawsuit involved, I think, Mike.
Thank you, Mike Santoro, Department of Housing. Yeah, I can answer that. Initially, the department's position was that they could, in fact, hold them over. There was a administrative request that was sought to clarify that. The legislature, in the meantime, passed legislation that allows specifically communities that have excess points with a moratorium request to carry those forward.
Okay, so that was settled.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. And the second point I wanted to mention was the importance of first floor commercial, retail, whatever non-residential use it may be. For a lot of the smaller communities, that is the economic drivers of our downtown. And if we do lose that, you're going to lose your downtown. And that's vitally critical to many of our smaller communities, is preserving the first floor non-residential issue. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you. Senator Marks.
So I'm just pushing back on that a tiny little bit. In New London, right? You know New London well. We've just developed so much. It's been fantastic. But we have so many buildings on Bank Street, on our main street, with residential first floor, that the owners of the buildings won't put in any business because they get the tax write-off from it. And we want to sell these buildings to improve them. A lot of them need a lot of work. So it might work. I mean, people might say that, but I don't know if that happens in Groton too, where, we're only 25,000 people and we have lots of places for commercial, and they're not moving in, and we have just so many empty storefronts on our main road. So, there is two sides to that story. I don't know. Does that happen in
Yeah.
Groton on Thames Street? I don't know.
In the city, I think there are some vacant or underutilized commercial properties. And within the town side of the jurisdiction, there are some certainly underutilized commercial properties. I don't see a lot of a driver or a need for those properties to then switch to first floor residential. I don't see people wanting to do that. But again, we are seeing some new commercial development, but it's in the majority of the form of banks and gas stations and car washes, because we are a commuter type of community, and our community is upset that we're getting car washes and other items. But if you have a 82% commuter rate, that's what we're seeing. We do see a big push in a lot of developers want to build more multifamily housing or the missing middle type housing within the community if that's allowed by zoning. So I think those are the areas if we wanted to push some regulatory changes, that's where it would be, you know, the buy right type of stuff in single family zones.
Just one more thing, when you said that the makeup of your zoning commission, and I know the Center for Housing Opportunity did a study on that, we did pass last year. We can get these young kids to to run for the zoning committee, and then they can get $5,000 for their student loans. So we're hoping that that helps a little bit and makes it more diverse, but it's hard. It's hard to serve when the municipality works during the day when the person's working, and then when they have all their questions at 9 o'clock at night, nobody's working. So it's hard.
Senator.
Yes, sir.
To Senator Marks earlier, you had asked the question, I believe, why are people against affordable housing? And Ridgefield's 25,000. So we're right there at the same population. In our community, there is a lot of pushback when it comes to affordability, especially the 8-30G. And the argument we hear most often is traffic. And it's already a traffic problem in our community on our roads. They're crowded, they're unsafe. And now you're bringing in more higher density projects that's only going to worsen that. However, I feel the real reason is that they don't want anything coming in after they've gotten into a neighborhood that could possibly impact the value of their homes, which they think is going to drop, which it doesn't. We've shown that in a couple of areas in our community where we have built affordability next to a pretty high rent area, and it had no negative impact whatsoever. It just doesn't. But the reason I believe is that they feel affordability, there's a stigma associated with that, and it's a negative one. And I don't know how to make that better. Communication is what we always look to, but in our community, we've lost our local newspaper. Newspapers aren't doing the business they used to. Social media has become a real difficult challenge for us because there's so many spins and negative information or just actually incorrect information that goes out, and people believe it. People believe everything they read, and now you're fighting not just to promote something, but to defend your position. And it makes it very difficult on affordability. We're fighting that constantly. We also have, to Groton, the number of units. We have one development that came in, was approved about 12 years ago for 300 units, 100 of which were affordable. It was never built. And today it sits there unbuilt and beautiful land ready to be built on, but the owners just have not built it. Why? I don't know. It was before the escalation in the cost of all your construction materials took place. And even then, they just didn't show an interest in building it. So we're stuck. We approved it, but we don't get any credit for those 100 units that are sitting there unbuilt. Thank you.
If I could respond. So we call that the drawbridge syndrome. So people get in and then they want to pull the drawbridge up after them once they've landed in a community. And, you know, one of the things that planners that we often do now, a lot of these mid or longer range projects that we do, we're not just developing the plans anymore. We need to work with groups, consultants on community engagement plans, outreach, social media. All this stuff is part of it, so much to the point that some communities now need to have full-time communications officers working for the town to help that spread of misinformation. You know, I have a master's degree in planning, a master's degree in marine affairs. I'm not an expert in communication tactics, but those are things that we've had to develop in our profession and get better and better at to kind of combat some of this misinformation. And that piece alone in many communities is a full-time job.
Thank you. One of the quick things, Emily, I think you said the nuggets was in the TOD areas where you're building housing, there's not been an increase in traffic. Is that correct?
No, I think the thing that folks should keep in mind is, you know, especially for us in Fairfield BlackRock, those were factories that employed 6,000 people on shifts. So when you think about commercial buildings, everybody punches in at the same time. When you think about residential developments, even when you've got 300 units, all those people have a different life story. Some of them have a 45-minute commute. Some of them have a 5-minute commute. Some of them have to drop off their kids before they go to work. Some of them work from home. So you don't have 300 people leaving all at the same time, nor do you have 300 people coming home at the same time. So residential is very dispersed throughout the day. It acts very differently. Major employers, sure, those are huge traffic generators. And again, you clock in all at the same time, you leave all at the same time. Residential acts very differently. So even though it's people's perception that this is going to be huge traffic generation, oftentimes it is not. So that's kind of what we try to keep reinforcing to people is the facts versus the fear.
Right.
And one of the things that's been fun, interesting in Groton recently is we've had a lot of complaints about all the traffic because all of the development that we've approved and that's been constructed, very little development has been approved and constructed. The reason the traffic has gone through the roof is because of all the additional jobs at General Dynamics, and it's all those commuters. So here we are, if we start solving some of our housing crisis, we probably see traffic actually going down a little bit.
Thank you. And I just want to repeat one more time, when we hear about people concerned about more kids in schools, we should actually be welcoming more families into our communities. We need more kids in our communities to grow. And if you look at New Hampshire, demographically, they did a lot of over 50s units for age. You had to be over 50 or 55. It's probably one of the oldest states, and now they're looking to try and attract more families. And that was a huge mistake. So to say we're just going to build apartments or we're going to build this or that, and not and try to shun children coming into our communities is a big, huge mistake, in my opinion. It's a big, huge mistake for communities. It's a big, huge mistake for our state. And we should always push back against that. Okay. Thank you both for your for coming today. We try to keep this to an hour and a half. We've gone over a little bit above, so I apologize to anybody. But thank you all for your great questions. Thank you for the presentations. Representative Rojas is again apologizing that he can't make it today, but he can certainly hear the recording afterwards. So we'll continue to have these meetings. I thank everybody for the participation. I hope everybody has a great day. Thank you.